Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So when I coach leaders, something that is very, very common for me to hear is, I wish that I could get into classrooms more often. And I also hear, I wish that I could interact with the kids more often. And finally, I hear, I feel like I'm stuck in my office all day just putting out fires, and I wish I could get out into the school more. And so I wonder if any of those things resonate with you, that you wish that you could blank. You wish you could be out in the school more, in the classrooms more. And let's face it, good intentions get derailed by the tyranny of the urgent. And I really want to help you with that, because I want to turn your good intentions into action, into your preferred future. And so if you're listening to this in real time, it's early August and your school year is either about to begin, or for some of you in the South, it maybe has already begun. And I know that you want to be a more visible leader this school year, this year. But being a visible leader is very, very, very difficult to do. But we also agree that it is very, very, very important to be a visible leader. So I'm going to help you out with that today, because on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to discuss the 5 keys to being a more visible leader. So I want to ask you a question. Do you have any difficult teachers at your school? Well, I hope you said no, but most of us said yes. And you know that they take up a lot of time and a lot of emotional energy, and sometimes it's very uncomfortable to deal with our difficult teachers, but we know that they have a pretty big impact on our school. So I created a new resource for you, a free resource to help you with your difficult teachers. And this is called 7 Strategies to Effectively Deal with Difficult Teacher. And I think that sometimes we need a little more confidence and a little more courage to deal with the difficult teachers in our buildings. And I believe that these strategies can give you a step-by-step game plan to help you have those meetings and put that teacher on a path of improvement. And if that sounds good to you, then over at theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult is a free guide for you that you can grab. Again, it's called 7 Strategies to Effectively Deal with Difficult Teachers at theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. And that's just a free gift to you for listening to the podcast. And I wanted to remind you again about something that I think can really change the way that you engage with work. I think that oftentimes we, as private school leaders, are like people in a raft going down the raging rapids. We're doing whitewater rafting, and we're in the raft. We've got the helmet, we've got the paddle, and we're just bouncing down the raging rapids. And that's our school day. That's just getting through the day, and it's a crazy ride. But what we never ever do is get out of the raft and stand over on the shore and look at what we do and how we do it. And then that leads to big problems in our lives. And so I think that one of the key steps to engaging with work differently, engaging with email differently, having some sustainable strategies between work and home so that we can, do a little something for ourselves and certainly be available to our family and our loved ones. I believe that all of that starts with starting to do work a little differently, especially as a private school leader. And I'd love to teach you how to do that. Thrive Academy is an online digital course that I've created for school leaders that are very, very specific strategies that work for the very specific job that we do, which is lead a private school. And so if that's something you want to learn a little bit more about, I'd love for you to just head over to theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. And I really believe that this could be a game changer for you at school and also at home. So that's at theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. All right. So we're in agreement that being a visible leader is very, very important. And I think we're also in agreement that being a visible leader is very, very difficult. And so let's talk about the 5 keys to being a more visible leader this school year. Key number 1, redefine the importance of being a visible leader. Key number 2, leverage high visibility moments. Key number 3, prioritize pop-ins. Key number 4, schedule your good intentions. And key number 5, track it. So 5 things are hard to remember. I mean, I don't know if you remember what you had for breakfast. I don't. And so that's why I'm going to take good care of you in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 95. And those things that I just mentioned will be there. And so I know that I always encourage you to be listening to the podcast while you're doing something else, commuting to or from school, doing errands, doing work around the house, taking the dog for a walk, whatever it might be, because you're so busy. I want you to be able to do 2 things at the same time, but also I want you to come back to this and then take action on these strategies that you learn on the podcast. So the show notes is a great way to do that. So if you can just listen, and then that information will be there for you when you're at a computer or able to jot down a couple of notes. So we're going to talk about the 5 keys to being a more visible leader this year. All right. Key number 1, redefine the importance of being a visible leader. So some of this is, I'm going to tell you, are things that you already know, but I think sometimes when we're going to change our behavior, we need to have a compelling reason to do it. And so I want you to just take a little walk with me, and we're going to revisit and redefine how important it is and why it is so important to be a visible leader. First of all, I feel strongly that it's one of the most important things that can make your school better. And that will be borne out here in the next couple of minutes as I continue to go down my list here. Visible leaders are more approachable, and that improves relationships because those informal conversations that happen when you're out and about in the school really improve relationships, and then they build trust. And it also, very importantly, being a visible leader builds credibility. So, I know that you may have heard through the grapevine that, she doesn't even know what's going on. She's always in her office, or he doesn't even understand, this problem that's happening at recess because he's never at recess. And so it really builds your credibility when it comes to solving problems and just in general, because you're out and about in the school, you're visible. Being a visible leader also, that increased accessibility assures that the concerns are shared by staff and that those concerns are noticed by you. So let's go back to the recess example for a moment. Something that I do is that every single day in my calendar is the lunch recess block, 30 minutes for recess, 30 minutes for lunch. And I'm out and about at both of those. I'm on the playground and on the field for recess, and then either in the lunchroom or at the picnic tables for lunch. And almost every one of my teachers that I supervise have either recess or lunch duty. And so if you think about all the boxes that I'm checking by doing that, A, I'm getting some fresh air. B, I'm interacting with kids and teachers, and that gives me joy and fills me up. But also, from a practical standpoint, I'm able to see if there's something that's a concern that's bubbling up. It could be safety in the school. It could be a procedure that's happening. It could be stuff that's bubbling up with, let's say, the 7th grade boys and how they're interacting with each other. Just all of those things that come up during a school day. And then that accessibility for me, for the teachers, almost always seeing me once a day at that time, if they've got something that's top of mind, be like, they're going to share it. And I'm glad that they do. Okay. And then that enables you to respond to these challenges effectively and promptly, because you're hearing it in real time or you're seeing it in real time. Okay, another big advantage to being a visible leader is it allows you to read the body language of the people that report to you. And I just mentioned about the recess lunch block. One of the things that I try to do is the people that I supervise, I may not actually have a conversation or even be close enough to say, hey, how's it going? But I really, really try to, through a combination of class changes, our morning religious service, and the recess lunch block, to put eyes on every single one of my teachers. And really that extends to not just the people that I supervise, but really everyone in my 2 divisions that I supervise, in all the teachers in that those divisions, to just put eyes on them and just to try to read their body language, because I think that school leaders are generally very high in emotional intelligence. And if you see a couple days in a row that 4th grade math teacher seems to be kind of down in the dumps or isn't really talking to people during lunch duty, and normally she's really gregarious and outgoing, then that's when you check in on her. And so, again, if we're not visible, these things happen. They continue to happen, and we're not aware of them. So reading body language, continuing with my list here of why it's so important to be visible. It allows you to take responsibility for your decisions. We make decisions sometimes, and then we get criticized because we're not out and about in helping see how those things are going, those new initiatives, how they're going, those decisions. But if we're out in the school, intentionally out in the school more often, we can see the outcomes of those decisions that we make. And then we're also modeling the behavior that we want to see from our teachers. And so let's say that you're a high integrity servant leader, lots of empathy, building trust and respect is important. Well, your teachers see that and you're modeling that, and then you will see that they will start to do that as well. It also causes increased accountability for your staff and students. If you can't just be in your office all day and then be angry and frustrated that people aren't showing up for duties on time, or that your teachers aren't, blank. I'm not saying that you have to be micromanaging them, but that visibility increases accountability. And also from a student standpoint, they see you as a person of authority, so that when you do have to deal with a student discipline issue, it helps when you have that rapport or have that relationship and you've already, begun to notice things. A couple more on this list, and I'll just pause to say, look, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I know that these things are important, but I think it's important to remind you why, because then I'm going to pivot into how. How are we going to be more visible? So just a couple more things. Demonstrates your commitment to the school. I think it inspires confidence in you as a leader. It improves teacher morale when they have a visible leader. I believe strongly it increases teacher retention because you're building those relationships, you're checking in. People want to work at a place and they want to work for a boss that sees them as human beings first and as employees second. And you can manage that much more. That's much more possible for you to accomplish if you are visible. And then finally, and I put this at the bottom of the list, but it's pretty important, is that it can fill you up and bring you joy, and it's fun. I have fun hanging out with the kids at recess and at lunch, and having those informal times to build that rapport and to just talk to them and see what they're doing, talk to the teachers. And so again, being in our office all day, and I realize that we're there for legitimate reasons, but we're going to talk about that in a second. Being in our office all day, that's not going to necessarily fill us up with joy, because we got into this for the kids. We got into this to empower and enable and build up our teachers. And if we're inside of that office all day long, that's not going to happen. And so, yes, do we have to be in our office for parts of the day? Of course. But I think with more intentionality, we can be more visible. So let's go on to key number 2. And key number 2 is leverage high visibility moments. So I can already hear what you're saying. you're saying, well, I can't be out in the school all day. Mark just doesn't understand. He doesn't understand my school. He doesn't understand how busy I am. And you're right. I'm not you. I'm not at your school. Every school culture is different. Every leader has a different number of students and staff that they're responsible for. But what we're not talking about being out in the school all day long. We are talking about progress, going from where you were last year as far as visibility, to being more visible. You're going to define what more visible looks like. But one of the ways that a busy school leader that wants to be more visible can do that is to leverage these high visibility moments. And so let's say that the school day is 7.5 hours long. You can be seen as a much more visible teacher, and you don't need to be out of your office for 7.5 hours, because there are moments that are much more high visibility than others. So arrival, for example, the morning religious service at your school, whether that is chapel or in our Jewish day school, it's called, it's called tefillah, or maybe in a Catholic school once a week with mass, or morning devotions, whatever, if you're a religious school and there's a common gathering, either once a week or especially if it's every morning, another high visibility moment. I mentioned recess and lunch are high visibility moments. Class changes, they're typically 2 to 3 or 4 minutes long and very high visibility. Kids in the hall, teachers in their doorways, hopefully, class changes, and they only last a few minutes, but that's a high visibility moment. You could be out in the hall during a class change and walk from one end of the hall to the other. That's what I do in the middle school. Sometimes also I do that in the intermediate school during class changes. And, you're being very visible at a very high visibility time. Dismissal is a high visibility time. And arrival and dismissal, you're also being visible for the parents who are dropping kids off, either walkers or carpool. And then sporting events as well. I will give a disclaimer / caveat here is that you don't have to be at every sporting event, at every home game, and you don't have to be there for the whole game. I coach a woman in Texas, and one of the things was she was going to every single home game of every sport and staying for the whole game, or if there were multiple games, staying for all the games. And I told her that, try coming a little bit late after the soccer game has started and stay until halftime. Or, if it's a volleyball match, stay for 1 or 2 of the games. We don't have to be at every sporting event for the entire time, unless that's in your contract. And maybe it is, I don't know. But I think for most school leaders, there's a sense of obligation and a sense of guilt. And we can be there, but we don't have to be there for the entire time. And again, I recognize that, your situation might be different, but sporting events can be a high visibility time, but we don't have to, stay until the final buzzer for all of these events. That brings us to key number 3. And key number 3 is to prioritize pop-ins. And so I'm not talking about formal observations. Let me explain what I do, and then you can kind of adjust it to what works for you. So on my calendar, once a week, I have for an hour, it just says pop-ins. And so I know that I supervise 4th through 8th grade, and each of those classes is split into 2 sections. So that's 5 grades, 10 sections. So I know that at any point in time during the school day that my kids are going to be in 10 different places. And so we have 60-minute periods. And so what I'm going to do is when it says pop-ins and it pops up on my schedule as an appointment, we have a 4-story building, and I know that all of my students are going to be either on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th floor. And so I go up to the 4th floor, and where the gym is and the music room and the band. And I just start, and wherever my kids are, I go in there, and I'm in that location, I'm in that room, I'm in that space for 5 minutes. And, I'm just informally in there kind of checking out what's going on. If it's drumming, if they're sitting and they're on djembe drums, I might sit down and drum, or just walk around and they're doing guided practice in math class and be like, hey, what are you working on? That kind of thing, those informal pop-ins. And if I keep an eye on the time, which I do, 5 minutes each location, then I go down to the third floor, and then I go down to the second floor, that I can hit all 10 of those spots for 5 minutes each during that 60-minute class period. And you might be thinking right now, yeah, it must be nice, or that's impossible. I just want you to think about what's possible. And I want you to think about all of the benefits of doing what I just described. It's awesome. You get the opportunity to see the kids in action, see the teachers in action. It's not what sometimes is a dog and pony show of the formal observation. It just becomes, normal for you and normal for them. And it's not stressful for the teachers. It lowers the stress level of my teachers because they see me in their classrooms often and not just twice a year for a formal observation. Because I post on Instagram, those are great times for me pulling out my phone and taking pictures of kids doing awesome stuff and fun stuff and posting it to Instagram. I really, really enjoy it. And I think you would enjoy it too. And so, again, it's more authentic than the formal observation that happens twice a year or 3 times a year, whatever you do. It reduces the teacher stress, and most importantly, it increases your visibility, and it's something that's fun that you can do. And I'll talk in a moment about how to make sure that happens. Okay, we're doing the 5 keys to becoming a more visible leader. Key number 1, redefine the importance of being a visible leader. Key number 2, leverage high visibility moments. Key number 3, prioritize pop-ins. And key number 4 is schedule your good intentions. So we've all heard that saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And then Mike Tyson also once said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And so I say those 2 things to say that if we have a plan, if we have good intentions, if they don't withstand the school day and the tyranny of the urgent, then they kind of fall apart. And good intentions are just like New Year's resolutions in many ways. Okay. So are your good intentions something like a New Year's resolution, or is it something that's going to stick, something that's going to continue? And here's my statement. I just believe that it's not going to happen unless it's a recurring appointment on your calendar and you treat it with the importance that it deserves. And so those pop-ins that are on my calendar once a week, I try and treat them like a very, very important appointment. Now, are there going to be times when a kid pushes a kid at recess? Sure. Are there going to be times when a parent calls and is really upset and I need to talk to them right away? Sure. But that might derail that pop-in time. But one of 2 things can happen then. I can either move it to later in the week, or maybe it just doesn't happen that week, but it's going to happen the next week. And if you look at how many weeks you have in a school year and it happens most of the time, that's a lot of hours in teachers' classrooms. It's informal, and it's on your calendar, okay? And then another thing about putting it on your calendar is, on my calendar, it's like I told you, I have recess and lunch on my calendar every day unless I'm having a teacher's meeting during the lunch recess block. I have the religious service on my calendar every day so that my phone is dinging me 10 minutes before so that I'm going to that time. I'm scheduling time once a week to be in the 4th and 5th grade homeroom classrooms. They're in there building a jigsaw puzzle or just hanging out. And once a week, I have it on my schedule to be in the middle school homeroom classes, just hanging out, building reports, 15 minutes long. Now, does that happen every single day? No. And I'll be honest, like the things that are on there for morning homeroom, those happen less often. You know, it might only happen once every couple of weeks, but it's on there. And if it's on there, it will happen, even if it happens sometimes. If it's not on there, I can tell you it's not going to happen. And so what I'm going to do is put in the show notes. I have a couple of screenshots of a before and after of my calendar, my school weekly Google Calendar. And you can kind of see what I mean, where there are things that are scheduled in there. And I just really believe strongly in scheduling your good intentions. And so in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 95, I will put that before and after photo of my Google Calendar. The before is just a blank kind of calendar with one or two things on it. And then the after is having scheduled all of these things, and you'll see some of the things that I've been talking about. And then that brings us to number 5, and that is track it. Key number five is track it. So in 2015, the Psychological Association of America did a study, and they asked the question, does frequently monitoring progress towards goals increase the chance of success? And they did a very extensive study about people with goals. And, the one group did all of these things. They had all these goals, but they didn't track their progress. And the other group had goals, but then they had a way to track their progress to see if it was actually making progress toward the goal. And their success rate was significantly higher than the group that did not monitor and record their progress. So you're like, okay, how am I going to do that? How do I track my progress of being a visible leader? That sounds very nebulous. Well, let's keep it simple. One thing that you can do is to, this is something that I've done the last few years, is like I told you that I have that pop in for an hour on my schedule. So I create a Google Doc and just make a table. And on the left side are all the dates with your pop in. The middle column, for my sake, I just put what period it was on that date. And then the third column is yes or no. Yes, I kept that appointment and I did it. No, I didn't. And I highlighted in green or red. That's just so that I can glance at it quickly, but you don't need to do that. Here's my point. When I'm tracking it, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh boy, I don't even remember why the previous 2 weeks say no, but that increases my determination that this week I'm going to get in there. And so tracking it makes it happen, honestly. And so again, it can be very simple. It can be a table on a Google Doc where you're just doing this for yourself and tracking your own progress. And then it might be that, next year or the year after, you want to add to something else that you're going to track about being visible. But I think a place to start would be that pop in and then just track your progress, whether you did it or didn't do it. No judgment. We're not attaching emotion to whether you did or you didn't, because legitimate things come up, but it will increase your time in the classrooms. And that's something that I hear time and time again from coaching clients that they want to increase. So let's wrap it up. What are the big takeaways from today's episode? The 5 keys to being a more visible leader this school year are: number 1, redefine the importance of being a visible leader. Number 2, leverage high visibility moments. Number 3, prioritize pop-ins. Number 4, schedule your good intentions. And number 5, track it. So our call to action is to schedule high visibility moments into your calendar as a recurring appointment. And so if that's arrival, or if that is the pop-in, or if it's recess and lunch, even start with 2 days a week or 3 days a week. Put it in your calendar like it's an appointment, and then try to keep those appointments. And I mentioned at the top of the episode that I have a new resource for you, and it's called 7 Strategies to Effectively Deal with Difficult Teachers. And I want to give you this as a free gift, just to say thank you for listening to the podcast. Hopefully it will help you when you're working with some of your difficult teachers at your school. and that's at theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. And this is a PDF that, will give you the steps, hopefully a game plan, and hopefully increase your courage and your confidence when you're sitting down to talk with a difficult teacher. So check that out at theprivateschoolleader.com/difficult. And then a final reminder that I really, really believe that Thrive Academy can change the way that you work. It can change your life outside of school. It can increase your energy level at the end of the day. It can help you be more productive. It can help you establish sustainable boundaries between work and home. And I believe in it, and I believe it can help you. And so you can check that out at theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. And I'd love to hear about your progress. And so shoot me an email, mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. It's so encouraging to hear when people are using strategies that they learned on the podcast. Recently, I heard from a person who I had strongly encouraged them to turn off email notifications on their phone. And they did that, and she said that it was like it had been 2 weeks, and it changed her life. She said that it feels like 50 pounds of weight was taken off of my back. And, of course, then we're working on trying to get those emails to happen, at a specific time of day instead of all day long. And so I'd love to hear from you. It's just so encouraging to hear from listeners when they're using the strategies. So just drop me a quick line at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. You can also, I've mentioned it before, but the show notes for today's episode are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 95. And Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, please write a review and rate the podcast. You can check me out on Instagram at The Private School Leader or Twitter at The PS Leader. And if you got value from this episode or any episode on the podcast, I would just ask you to share the link of the podcast with another school leader. Just email it to them or text them, or think about a rising leader, an aspiring leader at your school, and just send it to them. And I think this content can help them a lot. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I appreciate you so much, all of the hard work that you're doing. You're serving these kids and these teachers, and you're doing an amazing job. It's a lonely job. It's a hard job, but hopefully you're finding some encouragement and some support and some strategies here on the podcast. So thanks so much for taking some of your time, your precious time out of your busy week to join me here today. And I'll see you next time on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.